Welcome to the Gain Service Academy Admission Podcast. In these episodes, we will explore all things related to gaining a coveted appointment to the Air Force Academy, Naval Academy, and West Point. And here are your hosts, Rob Kirkland and Trish Penrod.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm here with Lieutenant Colonel Kirkland, and we are here excited to talk to you about the Space Force today. How are you today, Colonel Kirkland?
I'm doing good, Trish. I mean, it's been a little while. I know I've done a podcast or two, I think, without you, and I missed you.
I missed being on the show.
Where have you been? I know you've been around.
Surviving Florida somehow.
Yeah, I know. But it's good to be back. I know we've been wanting to do this podcast about Space Force, and I'm just so happy we're able to finally get this done. And
yes, me too, which is why I'm really excited to introduce First Lieutenant Sam Creemeyer today to the show. How are you, Sam?
I am doing great. How are you?
Very well, and we are very excited to have you on the show. Very excited to talk about, you are a recent graduate of the Air Force Academy, correct? The class of 2018?
That is correct.
And I'm 2011 myself, so I'm sure some things have changed, and I'm really excited to get your perspective today about the Air Force Academy, what your experience was like. Does it seem like it was a long time ago now?
You know, it kind of does. I even kind of look back and people talk about 2020, and I'm like, I feel like we're still in 2020, but it's 2021 and that's almost over. So 2018 feels like, centuries ago.
I'm sure. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and where you're from?
Yeah, absolutely. So first I'll start off with saying how awesome this podcast is. If I had something like this years ago, oh man, that would have been a huge benefit. But yeah, just a little bit about me. I actually grew up in Colorado, about 2 hours north of where the academy was, in the Fort Collins, Loveland area. And so I grew up there pretty much my entire life, grew up in a pretty large family, and with 6 older brothers and 2 little sisters. So there's never a dull moment. Yeah, never a dull moment in the Creemeyer household, and a lot of fun growing up. But something that we did growing up was wrestle. That was kind of the sport of choice because we were always kind of wrestling in the living room. So might as well just make it an official thing. And that kind of plays into my story a little bit later with the academy as well.
So I take it that was one of the factors that helped you get into the Air Force Academy.
Yeah, it was. And so I actually didn't get into the academy on my first go. I think part of it was because I was a little late on all of the application and stuff. I kind of made my way through high school, not really thinking about, the future or what's after high school. I figured I'd just kind of apply for colleges and then get in that way and then maybe just see where life takes me. But, the academy, you have to kind of have this rigorous application process.
Definitely.
And you have to kind of get on that early. So, I kind of let that get past me. My senior year, I can't really put in an application for the Air Force Academy in May. You can't really expect any good results there. So, I had a lot of fun in high school, but realized maybe, the academy is something that I wanted to pursue. And I actually had one of my older brothers who was a phenomenal wrestler and got recruited by, West Point as well as the Air Force Academy, chose the Air Force Academy. And I kind of got to, watch him go through his academy life. He was a 14 grad, and just kind of see, the rigors that were when he was a freshman, sophomore, and all that stuff, but also the opportunities that were being presented to him. And then as I kind of matured in my life and where I wanted to go, I kind of saw, hey, it is great to have a plan after high school. The college can be tough and it can be expensive. And, not everybody that goes to college will have a guaranteed job afterwards. And oh yeah, your college is kind of covered. Financially, you do have to make some sacrifices here and there. But it's something where, delayed gratification is certainly something when it comes to, hey, what do I want to do for the next 4 years of my life? Do I want to kind of live it up in a college dorm, or go a different path, or do I want to kind of put my nose to the grindstone for the next 4 years? It might be a little tough and not your average college experience, but it's going to reap some benefits down the road. So having to think about that before, even this whole application process was, an interesting time in a teenager's life.
I bet. And it's very interesting that you didn't apply your senior year, and that you went the year after. When would you say you first really got serious about applying?
So I owe a lot of the credit to my brother, because he kind of helped pave that way, and he was an excellent wrestler in at the Air Force Academy. Had a lot of success there, and I still wrestled in high school and found some successes there as well. But the coaches at the academy said, "Hey, yeah, this is a guy that we're still willing to pursue and invest in. So let's continue to keep the conversation going. I understand that you can get in directly after your senior year. We'll work with you." So I went to CSU, Colorado State University, for a semester. And I kind of, made my way through the application process. If it's going to be, it's going to be. But if not, it's not the end of the world. But as I continued to go through my college experience, and one part was seeing the kind of debt that I was racking up. Another part was seeing like, hey, this isn't super fulfilling. And I always felt in my life that I was called for something more. And by no means am I kind of knocking individuals that go to a university. I think there's a lot of great things there, but I was just kind of, not really tapping into my full potential is how I would put it when I was there. And I decided not to continue going to college afterwards, or at CSU, because it was just kind of too expensive for me. But my application was in for the academy. I kind of checked all the boxes I need to with the fitness test and meeting with my ALO and all this other stuff you need to do. And I was kind of in limbo for about a month, kind of keeping my fingers crossed. And, it was in those moments where I was like, I really hope this works out. This is something passionate, or something that I'm passionate about. And I'm not really going to know what my life is going to entail if I don't get into the academy. Sure, I'll figure it out, but this is kind of one of my heart's desires to go to this school and experience all these different opportunities.
Yeah, and clearly you pivoted very well. It worked out.
Yeah, luckily.
Now, when you went to CSU, what type of classes did you take while you were there? Did you plan anything in advance, like thinking, okay, I'm going to take classes that will prepare me for the Air Force Academy, or did you just take general core? What was your strategy?
My strategy there was, hey, let's check all the boxes as soon as possible, like all the core ones that you needed to take, like physics and I think music appreciation was one of them. One of those electives that you kind of have to, put on the schedule. But that was an interesting class. I think I took a history of 1875 to present class. What else was there? I think
physics and history sounds both like classes that the academy are really pay attention to, and they want to see that you're going to succeed with all the math and the engineering heavy courses there.
Yeah, and those, I'll tell you what, at CSU I struggled pretty hard with physics, but then at the academy it was like one of my favorite classes. So it was a huge kind of turn there.
Was that because of the curriculum or the teachers, or what? Why do you think that happened?
And I'm sure this will come up later, in the conversation, but I don't know if it was my learning style or, some of the instructors at the academy are, top of the line. The class sizes, max is 20 to 25 individuals, but my physics class at CSU, I think had, over 200 people in it. Maybe it's over 100, but, it's that huge auditorium, where you don't have a lot of attention, don't really
Yeah.
feel like asking a question right now because, I'm just in a room full of all these other individuals. So why does it matter? But I was pretty lazy in uh, in my college days when it came to CSU.
Yeah, quite the transition to go from the ability to have that and then to the structure of the Air Force Academy.
Right. Yeah. I think that's what I needed.
So, other than your brother, did anyone else, was anyone else in your family in the military?
Surprisingly, no. I Going through life, I never really even thought about it. You have a lot of great characters and individuals growing up where it's their main goal to serve their country. Because their dad did, and their grandpa did, and their dad, and all. It kind of goes through the lineage. But myself, I didn't really know anyone particularly. Um, had an uncle, I believe, that served in the army for a little bit, but it was just something that I didn't really think about. And even in high school, I didn't really think about doing the JROTC programs at all. I did do a couple of those pull-up challenges at wrestling tournaments. The Marine Corps like to come out for those, but that's
Yeah.
that's about the only connection I had and desire to be in the military.
So it sounds like your brother had a very huge influence on your decision.
Yeah, and he'd probably agree with me to say that he didn't really have a whole lot of desire either. But he was an individual that could see opportunity, and then just how could I not capitalize on this? And obviously, there are some athletes that um, have they get recruited, and they don't really know what it's going to be like at the academy, but it's an opportunity to go to continue doing something they're passionate about, whether that's playing football or wrestling or playing tennis. Um, but I think any any grad can kind of see like, hey, that's not going to keep you there. Your sport, if that's the only reason why, then that's not a sustainable thing.
Yeah. Yeah. We like to break down the admissions process into three type of categories. And it's the same. It's the attributes that the admissions panel looks at when they're looking at a candidate. It's the scholar, the athlete, and the leader aspects of your high school career. And unlike traditional college where you really just scholar with some extracurriculars, the athlete and the leader play a larger role. How would you say that you fit into those three categories from your high school days and even into your year of college?
Yeah, so I think on the I guess starting with the scholar side of the house, I always kind of got my work done. I wasn't a 4.0 student by any means, but I think I kind of maintained like a 3.3, 3.4 GPA. And this is a high school where I think we were 5A. I went to Loveland High School, and I think our graduating class was around like 356 or so. And I think I might have been top 20%. I'm not sure. It's crazy to think that was like 10 years ago. But academically, I sought those AP classes. I would say partially because a lot of my friends were taking them, and I kind of surrounded myself by kids that you know were great in the academic realm, and just good kids to kind of hang around. So I wasn't a genius by any means, but I really just got my work done on time. And I think people will find if you do that, you'll do pretty well.
Yeah, and those AP classes are huge too, pushing yourself, surrounding yourself with people who are going to push you, which it sounds like your friends were doing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I maybe took a total of 4 AP classes and took some tests there. I was actually pretty good in math. I enjoyed that class, and I think made it to like Calc BC, AP Calc BC,
Wow, that's
my
impressive. Yeah.
my senior year. So that I think helped a lot when it came to academy curriculum. But I'll tell you what, some of those AP classes, I took the tests and I got like my highest score was a 1. So
Oh no.
yeah. So if there's anybody out there that struggles with AP test taking, there is hope. But yeah, it wasn't the best AP test taker. Um, but that's just because I didn't prepare very well. And, I thought to myself, if what's the use of transferring these AP classes into college? I think I can, but I'll need a really high score, but I'm not going to put in the work to prepare. So that was the reason for my failure on that part.
And how did you do on the SAT or ACT?
Yeah, so that was I completely forgot about that one. So I didn't have to take the SAT in Colorado, but the ACT I actually had to take 3 times because there was a minimum threshold for the academy that I kind of had to get. I think I did pretty good on the math and science portion. I think I got around like 27 or 28, but for the reading and writing portion, I think for the reading I got an 18. So it was pretty low, and that was the score that I had to keep going back and get that test grade at, because I'm one of those individuals that will read something. I get so much anxiety, when I'm taking a test, and if I'm reading, all I'm thinking about is how terrible I'm doing at the test, and I'm not paying attention to the words I'm reading, and then I get to the end, and I'm like, holy cow, what did I read? Some of these
Yeah,
questions
that's
don't even
that's
make
how I
sense.
felt when I took the SAT.
Yeah, and it was like, I don't have time to go back and read this again, so I have to guess. So long story short, wasn't the best reading test taker, and that's also because I didn't really enjoy reading growing up or anything like that. But that has certainly changed. Love reading books now.
It's funny how that changes as you get older sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's really nice that most of the academy is super score, right? So if there is that lower test score, you can keep retesting, and the academy will take the higher scores for each category, which is great.
Yeah, and that was super helpful. And on the athlete side of the house, I kind of hinted on it a little bit earlier. Growing up in a pretty big family, going to wrestling tournaments a lot. That's something that I found I was pretty gifted with. I think got fourth in state my sophomore year, fourth my junior year, and then was a state champion my senior year. So that really helped with the athlete portion. Just kind of, and I also did kind of like cross country. I was the slowest guy on the cross country team, but it was such a fun group to be around and hang out with. And I think it helped just kind of with my athletics, and then also did track like my senior year just for kicks, just because it was fun. But yeah, that athlete side, and then the leader side, I was involved with student council. In my high school, the student council was a lot of fun people. I think that's kind of why I joined. Wasn't super thrilled about like committees and doing all that stuff, but it was really like, hey, what are my friends doing? I'm gonna go just like hang out with them because we have a class set aside where I can just go and and chill with them. And then just kind of found myself through the years, my senior years, becoming the senior class president there. So I think that was a good help on the that side of the house when it comes to the scholar athlete leader.
Yeah, any position within the student body, but specifically class president, definitely a big help.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, certainly.
Colonel Kirkland, do you have any other questions?
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I mean, these were very, very insightful. I think it shows. I mean, that Sam, you're a very well-rounded individual, and and was certainly somebody who was a worthy candidate of the Air Force Academy. So that's great. I guess my other question, and on our outline is. The interview portion of this, and with both your congressman and your ALO, how did that go in general? Anything to take out of those?
Yeah, so I think any smart ALO, seeing where I was in the application process, somebody going through CSU. Maybe doesn't have as robust of a resume as a lot of the other individuals that got into the academy. I'm pretty sure my ALO was like, yeah, there's no chance. And so that was kind of a blow, but luckily they don't have a final say on a lot of that stuff. So through the process of like continuing to work through my resume and work with the coaches at the academy, was able to get a spot with the prep school. So didn't get anything from my congressman, going into the prep school, because that's not a mandatory thing. But the prep school is really a great opportunity for athletes to kind of get that redshirt year under their belt, since you can't do that at the Air Force Academy. But the prep school, you also take some classes that are very, very, I guess, pointed to and prepare you for the classes that you're going to be taking up on the hill, is what they kind of call it at the academy. And so, the math classes, the physics classes, the writing, and all that stuff, they do a great job at posturing you to be successful there, while balancing what it looks like to be at a military academy, balancing what it means to be an athlete, and all that stuff too. And coming out of that, you have to do a really hard. It's really difficult not to get like a congressional nomination going into the academy. A lot of people from the prep school, there's a very, very small amount that don't. So that's kind of what helped me get that nomination going into the academy.
Yeah, we've done a podcast on the prep school, and I think one of the major reasons why the prep school is so advantageous, if you can, they call it the golden ticket, is also because you're considered active duty Air Force, so you can you qualify under, or more of the folks who go to the prep school fall under those categories that allows them to get nominations through different sources.
Right, exactly.
Oh, that's great. Well, that's awesome. I mean, God, Trish, we should invite him back to get his impression about the prep school.
Definitely. Definitely.
I was just thinking, I didn't even realize on our sheet that he was actually a prep school graduate too. That's pretty cool. So probably we could probably talk about that for a while here, but we probably just want to just finish up the part with kind of about his impressions about the Air Force Academy and and things like that. So, so I guess, Sam, what'd you major in, and once you went into the Air Force Academy, how was your experience there?
Yeah. So, I kind of had an idea what my major was going to be. I had floated this idea of, did I want to be a pilot? Because, it seems sometimes that can kind of point you in a certain direction of what major you want to do. But I found a lot of my passions lied in the business realm. So I did business management. My dad owns a small business. And so I also like working with people, solving problems on that level. I do enjoy, your STEM type of curriculum. So, and you will get a lot of that at the academy. But once it came to like, hey, what does it look like to scale a business, or, what does innovation look like? What does consulting look like, or marketing and all that stuff? That's kind of what made me tick. And so, I didn't really get into that until probably sophomore, junior year. But I think I rang the bell, which is essentially, declaring your major my freshman year, maybe the second semester. So that was something that I don't regret right now, and something that I'm applying to my active duty job, in the Space Force. But the classes were great. That I think I kind of mentioned earlier with, I think it does make a difference with the teacher, the instructor, the curriculum that they're going through, the class size, and sure, if people have listened to this podcast, maybe it has been mentioned, it's called EI, extra instruction, where, instructors are, kind of mandated to set aside this time where students can block off their calendars and go get that extra instruction. If they have certain questions or they don't get a concept, they can go and do that. So, the stuff was, at least the content was pretty rigorous, and it was a lot. But they were able to break it down and help you understand in a way that was easily understandable.
I don't
And you
think we
can,
have talked about EI before, and it's such a good point to make compared to traditional college, that extra ability to just get hands-on instruction for the things that you don't understand.
yeah, it's, I've leveraged it. I know people that have used it a lot in the past too, and instructors actually like they love it. They're not ones that are like, oh no, somebody has my whole entire schedule booked because they can't understand this dang process or concept. And it's like, hey, they love having you in there to expand your learning and try to get some of those concepts. So yeah, it's something I never heard of before until I went to the academy.
And what would you say it's like living where you work and always living with the military mindset and just being on campus all the time?
Yeah, that was a tough one for me, and I think just even going through basic at the start was a shock. And then you wake up in your office essentially, and you wake up where you work, because you do your homework in your dorm room, you sleep in your dorm room, you hang out with your friends in your dorm room, and then you go to class or you go to practice. So you spend a lot of time there. So it can get a little taxing. But there is some resiliency and character that is built up through that. Um, Certainly makes you take the little things for granted, like having that kind of freedom. But it also just kind of helps you stay on track with time management. You walk a couple steps to get food, and then you walk some more steps to go to class, and then you leave. It's you kind of live in one small radius. But if you make a lot of good friends there, then it's a lot of fun to just you can just walk over to your buddy's room and just hang out for a little bit and joke around.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of buddies, did you have any classmates that changed their mind and left before graduation?
Um, yeah, I think being on the wrestling team, a lot of my friends were in that I guess on the wrestling team. So a lot of my squad mates and stuff like that, I did see some leave, did see some teammates leave. And it was kind of a bummer. There was certainly times when I thought, man, it would be a lot better if I left. I think I could kind of make it going to a different university or doing something else. Um, but it was never something that I could come to grips to as giving up this opportunity that a lot of people spend their life trying to accomplish, and that maybe they can't get in. So it was always kind of a bummer to see people that I was acquainted with say like, hey, yeah, this is just not for me. I'm gonna go do something else with my life. I think we saw a lot of athletes kind of do that.
Did you think the most common reason for that was just that they saw other opportunities that they wanted to pursue, or they were tired of the military environment? What do you think like the most common reasons for leaving were?
Yeah, I think at least for athletes, probably one of the most common things was maybe they didn't get the right picture or understanding of what they were getting themselves into.
Yeah.
They probably thought, oh, I'm just going to go kind of do this sport and just go to class, and it's all going to be kind of covered. But they didn't really see that there's this whole other military aspect to it. And then those that kind of weren't. I think a big part of it was academics. Um, People that couldn't maintain the baseline GPA to make it through, and then maybe it was just too hard, and they couldn't really figure out time management. And then they just kind of thought, hey, yeah, this isn't for me. I don't really want to do the military anyways. I can't see myself serving after. So I think that was a huge part of it.
That makes a lot of sense. And do you know how many people about you started with freshman year and then how many people graduated in your class?
Yeah, I think our freshman class, when we kind of came, maybe it was going into basic, because there are some that kind of weed out after that. I think it was around 1,200 that went in, and then when we graduated, I think we graduated with the mid 800s, maybe like 800 and
Wow.
840 or something. So
Wow.
you know, Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's quite a hit.
Oh, wow.
Very, very interesting. I'm most years I think it's more in the mid 900s or like maybe low 900s, but 840. That's very quite. You guys had a tough year.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure what happened, but just some people just saw it wasn't for them.
Definitely. Well, let's talk about your career in the Space Force.
Yeah, I think maybe some people listening to this are like, "What did they just say?" Space Force, but yes, it's a thing.
Can you tell us a little about what the Space Force is?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Space Force stood up. I think the birthday is December 20th, 2019. So it's very, very new. Something that was in the NDAA for that year was the birth of Space Force. And so if you're familiar with kind of the structure of the Air Force and some of the MAGCOMs that were in there, what they thought, with former President Donald Trump, kind of saying, "Hey, there is a need for a space force." I think where things are headed in the future, it would be prudent for us to have this own separate military branch. And one of the MAGCOMs in the Air Force was Air Force Space Command. So they just kind of took all the mission that was happening there. And stood up, its own kind of military branch. So there was a lot of space bases in the Air Force. You had Vandenberg Air Force Base, Buckley, Peterson.
Vandenberg's in California, right? Buckley and Peterson are in Colorado.
That's correct. Yeah. And I was actually at Vandenberg for my first assignment. And then there's Patrick out in Florida, but you also have like Thule, which is in Greenland, and some other locations that now the Space Force has. And I think here pretty recently, you had like Peterson Air Force Base switch to Peterson Space Force Base, and same thing with Buckley and Vandenberg and Patrick there. But it's a super interesting thing. And I think a lot of people were like, "Hey, this kind of came out of nowhere. Why are we kind of doing this?" But I got the opportunity to tour the Pentagon a couple months ago in my position, and we got to see, the Space Force, Heritage Hall, and a lot of the cool things, and some of the different makers in that realm. But they were actually contemplating standing up a Space Force back before 9/11. And, once that kind of went down, I think it made people kind of shift their attention and their focus on some other things, rightfully so. But that was something that was being communicated and looked at even that long ago. So kind of an interesting thing.
So does that mean that I remember the domains of the Air Force are airspace and cyberspace, or used to be space. So now Air Force is just air and cyberspace, and Space Force has taken on space completely?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think they're still writing, or maybe they just published something just recently, but I think the Air Force is still the same. And I'm not sure if that's because, similar to what you see with the Marine Corps and the Navy, where the Space Force is in the Department of the Air Force. But, you have the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, who kind of is the highest ranking individual for the Air Force. But then you have the Chief of Space Operations, who's a 4-star as well, who's kind of been elevated into the same position, serving under the Secretary of the Air Force.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
That's a good way to, I think about it, maybe as the Marine Corps Commandant, as part of the Navy, but yet it's a separate service. But maybe the Navy takes on a lot of the logistics and administrative overhead for the Marine Corps.
Right.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And, when the Space Force stood up, they kept it in their minds that, hey, we want to keep this a pretty small force, and you will have aspects of the Air Force still supporting the Space Force. They transferred over a small amount of AFSCs, Air Force Specialty Codes, kind of your career number, what job you have, into the Space Force. And so the ones that they transferred over, they had like their organic ones that were, this is kind of obvious. to transfer over with, you have space operations. So yeah, let's go ahead and transfer them over automatically. But you had others that were optional, common AFSCs, and that was like intelligence, cyber engineers, and acquisitions, where they can support both, but there's also a very unique niche with the space realm and space domain, where cyber intel and acquisitions, all that, it would make sense to make a separate one. So those were some of the others that had the option to transfer into the Space Force. But if you have like security forces, contracting, or some of the other AFSCs, those don't exist within the Space Force, and are supported from the Air Force.
So Sam, as a Space Force officer, how long now have you been a first lieutenant?
Yeah, so I started out when I graduated the academy. I commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Air Force, and so I was a second lieutenant for 2 years while I was out at Vandenberg in a contracting squadron, serving, and a 64P is what they call it. It's an OPEX. I could probably talk about that later. So I was still in the Air Force as a second lieutenant, and then was in the Air Force as a first lieutenant for, I believe, I think 9 months, and then transferred into the Space Force. So then back in February was when I was officially transferred over into the Space Force, and I'm still a first lieutenant. So I've been a first lieutenant for a little over a year, maybe closer to a year and a half.
So you've been in the Space Force now for about 8 months.
That's correct. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's great. That's great. And it seems like a lot of people, like there's a bunch of different ways to get into the Space Force. And what you did, it seems like it's about a third of what's going on in terms of they're taking about 100 current Air Force officers a year and transferring them into the Space Force. This year, or excuse me, last year, the Air Force Academy graduated 118 officers into the Space Force, and ROTC graduated about 60 officers. So, about a little over 100 are transitioning from the Air Force, but brand new second lieutenants every year, it's about 200.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Yeah, when I transferred, it was, hey, we're going to figure out how to transfer, because I was an acquisitions guy. I just did contracting as an operational experience, but my main job was acquisition. So when they kind of let it out saying, hey, Space Force is going to be a thing, we're going to transfer some acquisition folks in, let's sign up here if you want to even do that. So I was kind of part of the first wave of taking all the Air Force individuals and then transferring those into the Space Force, at least in the acquisition career field. And then that just kind of finally went through back in February for at least CGOs, your company grade officers.
Okay. Yeah.
Interesting. No, I was going to say that, sorry to interrupt there, Trish. I was just going to ask about, what do you see the junior role in Space Force being, junior officer role being in Space Force with the different, AFSCs?
Yeah, so I think it's different across the board. If you kind of look at space operations, or the ones that are on the ops floors working on the mission, as a young officer, you're probably leading a flight of other individuals, just kind of seeing, depending on your mission, that whether you're working shifts or whatever, that the mission gets done, and then some of the other common AFSCs that are supporting, whether that's intel, cyber, being an engineer, or acquisitions, you're finding new innovative ways to push the mission forward and support the operators. So as a just a first lieutenant, it might seem like, hey, I don't have a lot of impact when it comes to acquisitions, but the Space Force, I think, is kind of setting itself up in a manner where you don't have to be a colonel, or a 3-star or anything like that to make a lot of impact. as a young officer, you're encouraged to kind of shake things up a little bit, and maybe take some risks and help the decision makers see and understand that kind of risk, at least in the acquisition realm. I'm finding new ways to try to speed up and kind of break down some bureaucratic walls that the DoD has put in place when it comes to acquisitions. And that's probably a whole nother podcast and issue is the acquisitions within the Department of Defense. But as a young lieutenant, it's just fun to try to go and find different innovative ways to make things move faster.
And Sam, what kind of budget are you responsible for?
So my case is a little different. So I'm part of an organization called Space Camp, and so that's it's not the kids camp that you go to when you're younger to learn about space and astronauts and stuff like that. Although I do wish that I did go there. Unfortunately, I did not. Yeah, exactly. But it stands for Commercially Augmented Mission Platform, and so we develop software for the space operators and people within the Space Force, really taking industry practices and finding out how to do that in the DoD, because in the past software, the DoD didn't do software very well. You spend many months and years trying to develop something and you deliver it and it doesn't work. But here at Space Camp, we take into what makes your Facebooks and your Googles and your Netflix is so successful with software development and bring it into Space Camp. So it kind of started a little underground, and then people saw the value of it and are wanting to invest in it. And so we're not necessarily a program of record where we have this big pot of money where we kind of have to allocate resources and send investments here and there, but we do a lot of customer funding. So we work with other organizations within the Space Force, and they'll kind of send us money, for lack of a better term. And I don't want to get too much into the weeds on acquisitions and MIPRs and all that fun stuff, but they just partner with us and they want us to build out a capability for them. So I know that was a long way to answer a small question, but
no, I mean,
last year we probably did, speaking in commercial terms, probably around $33 million of business.
And is that for your organization, or how much of a piece of that are you responsible for throughout the year?
Yeah, so that's for the whole organization, but I myself and some of the work that I do in an acquisition role, I kind of oversee all of that.
That's a huge responsibility for a company grade officer.
Yeah, it's interesting, and then even in like the contracting realm, when I was in a contracting squadron, I was able to get my warrant, which essentially allows you to spend the government's money. It's taxpayer dollars, but you see company grade officers in the Air Force in charge of signing and entering into contracts with individuals for $5 million up to an unlimited amount. If they're going on deployments too, they have that kind of that authority. And if you're managing contracts, I think I was managing a total contract portfolio of around, $102 million.
Yeah.
So a lot of responsibility, but it's fun.
And what do you think the most important trait in terms of like an intrinsic military trait is in that type of position, like something from, the honor code type trait?
Yeah. So there's some horror stories out there when it comes to, if you're working with a large amount of money and you're working with contractors, sometimes there can be things that happen behind doors and looking for deals to be made. But, just kind of having that integrity, I'd say is a huge trait and something that, you kind of pick up a lot at an academy is just doing the right thing even when no one's watching. So that certainly helps in that realm when you have to bring some integrity into business transactions or contracts and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, most definitely. I guess kind of looking at acquisitions as a whole, stepping back, why did you choose acquisitions from the academy, and what other options were available, and how competitive was acquisitions?
So when I was kind of going through and trying to figure out what I wanted to do in the Air Force, I didn't really want to go the pilot route or anything like that. But being in business management, one of the things that I could see translate, as best as possible was acquisitions, managing programs, and whether that's handling a budget or trying to make timelines or managing that type of stuff. Acquisitions fit most, I guess, snugly, if that's a word. I'm not sure it is, but I did say my reading and writing wasn't the best score in my ACTs. But
We'll catch a break.
I appreciate that. So yeah, they also had that opportunity for an OPEX, where you go and do a different AFSC for the first 3 years to kind of gain some different experience in what other career fields are doing. And contracting was another one of those things where it's like, hey, I might be able to apply a lot of these different business principles to my job, and I get to work with people and manage programs and budgets and all that stuff. So that's what I saw was most applicable there, and it sounded the coolest to me. Certainly, I'm not flying Mach 1.2 or whatever, but I am able to kind of see how dollars are flowing through the mission. And so I think in my grade, when we graduated, I want to say maybe there was like 60 slots spread across contracting and acquisitions. And I think the year after me, I think they took it off like that. I don't think there was any opportunities for acquisitions or contracting. So it's one of those things where it might change here and there, but I think they've probably come to a better cadence on how many are open. But it's nothing close to there's 600 or 700 pilot slots. Maybe that's a really high number, but maybe it's more like 300 or 350.
Yeah.
There's a small number for acquisitions and contracting, but you honestly don't learn a whole lot about it, when you're at the academy. I'll full transparency. When I got contracting, I was like, okay, I know it's working with money and projects and stuff, but what is it? Like, what is contracting? I hear contracting officer, but I don't know what that means. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's I think one of the great opportunities that is available to cadets at the service academies is to go on those summer exposure programs, go overseas to bases or stateside to bases and get exposure to different Air Force specialty codes. But unfortunately, I don't think contracting is a very common one that people get to see beforehand.
Yeah, I do remember shadowing one. I went to Travis on mine, and I shadowed the contracting office for, I think, maybe an hour or two, and I still walked away, and I was like, I don't know. Maybe that was because I couldn't really wrap my head around it. I was stuck in California, so maybe I wasn't really paying attention. But yeah, paperwork. That's all I heard.
Well, it's really interesting how it's grown over the last few years, because the year when Space Force stood up, I think 30 cadets from the Air Force Academy commissioned directly into the Space Force. Last year, 2020, 86 cadets, and then 2021, 118. So it's definitely growing. There's an opportunity. Yeah. And my understanding is it is still very competitive, even with 118 slots. But since they've opened up more career fields, space operations, intel, cyber, and acquisitions, there's just more opportunity now for people within Space Force. Colonel Kirkland, I know you have some insight on the ROTC side of the house.
Yeah, I talked to a professor of aerospace science regarding what the current accessions are going on with the ROTC. Air Force ROTC into the Space Force. And his answer, Sam, was, and I'll just read it, is that it's very competitive. First, there's a 13S Space Operations Officer Board where the cadets compete for the Air Force Specialty Code 13S. And then Air Force ROTC runs a full rated board, including those who competed in the 13S board. For those selected for both, the cadet will be given a position for which they're more qualified, meaning the higher order of merit they receive. So they say USSF takes precedence if they compete for that service. So there are about 60 slots per year, with 24 coming from tech degrees and 36 coming from non-tech. However, if they have a critical major such as electrical engineering or meteorology, they're ineligible for the 13S board. As far as GPA, the minimums are greater than 2 or equal to 2.0, but in reality, they are looking at much higher, as in the mid to high threes. They need to take the AFOQT like everyone else. No tests are required, similar to pilots. So that's his overview of the ROTC route. And just from my standpoint, looking at it, looks to be that's the much harder route to Space Force is through ROTC than the Air Force Academy.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Those are some crazy numbers.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like if it's only 60, and I know that Air Force ROTC total numbers is each year I think is probably double or maybe even triple the numbers of the Air Force Academy. You're looking at a much greater difficulty of getting into Space Force from ROTC, but it still is doable, and it looks like that they're taking non-tech, more non-tech than tech. So interesting information. And don't major in electrical engineering or meteorology. You're not going to get into Space Force from ROTC.
Yeah, that's super interesting, and I know, and sure, it's very competitive, but I think the Space Force is capped out at only, I want to say 16,000 people. I could be wrong there. I might have to fact check me, but yeah, I think they're intentionally trying to stay a very small service. So I'm sure that certainly contributes to the competitiveness to try to get in.
Yeah. Wow. 16,000. That's just a fraction of the other services.
Right.
With that being said, what do you think the future of the Space Force is going forward?
I think there's a lot of different things that could happen, and you might see, if you kind of look into the Space Force, there's a lot of talk about being agile, lean, and digital. There's going to be a huge emphasis on being a digital force, even with the way that the world is moving, some of the different directions, and adoption of even industry and becoming more digital there as well, and even just access to space. You're seeing a lot of the industry leaders like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson, and trying to have this assured access to space, and even on the commercial side. So the Space Force has and will continue to have a huge part in that. I'm not sure how much we'll be involved with. I'm sure there will be a lot with Mars exploration, but there's also this fact of space should remain an uncontested environment, but there are some bad actors out there, and we want to make sure that we protect a lot of our assets that are out there, and make sure that whatever's happening in space is, we can make sure we have a good pulse on that. And I would wager to say everything that we do have in space is probably some of the most important things that we have to our infrastructure as a nation. With satellites, think first thing you do when you wake up in the morning, if you get on your phone, you're already tapping into space. You're sending a text message, checking your bank account, trading on the stock market, making a phone call, GPS, making your way to work, everything touches space. And so that environment, when it comes to crippling economies or waging war is all tied to space. So we want to make sure that we have good control over that and make sure nothing too crazy happens. Now, are we going to get to a point where it's like Star Trek and we have all these battleships in space and stuff like that? I can't say there. I don't know if we will get there anytime soon, but I think just being able to defend that area of our, I guess, the way we work as a nation is crucial.
Yeah, it's really fascinating just how little we all think about how tied our lives are to space and that, our Space Force is defending that and this the uncontested nature of space and how contested it is in reality. Yeah. So very interesting. Colonel Kirkland, do you have any final thoughts for Sam?
Well, I would be amiss to ask what's the role for us Army guys or a Navy person or a Marine in the future of Space Force? Has that been kind of ironed out, or have you been hearing anything about ability for other services maybe to become a part of Space Force?
Yeah, so I think just recently we transferred some, I think everyone from Navy, Marines, Army, maybe Coast Guard as well, into the Space Force. So those individuals are able to transfer. I'm not sure what the numbers look like there, but space is a joint environment. There's a lot of partnerships with the Navy and Army and Marines, whether that's at the U.S. Space Command or everywhere. Is everything that does touch space, that includes all of our different military branches as well, and our allied partners, whether that's Canada or New Zealand or all these other different countries. It's there's opportunity to tap into it, whether that's maybe, hey, I'm still wearing the Army uniform, but I go serve in a joint position supporting the Space Force or something like that. I think there's a plethora of opportunity and probably going to be an increased amount of opportunity in the future for that.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I don't have any other questions, Trish.
Great. Well, Lieutenant Creamier, thank you so much for just giving us some insight into what it's like to be a Space Force officer and your time at the Air Force Academy. And we really appreciate everything that you do. And thank you for your service. And thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can't thank you enough for the opportunity to come on the show and kind of talk about my experience with the Academy and then all the fun that I'm having in the Space Force. It's certainly a fun thing to talk about. And if people ever want to reach me, my name is pretty unique, Sam Creamier. So just you can just reach out if you have more questions. But I think this podcast is phenomenal for those individuals looking to join the Service Academy or look into the Space Force. And I really look forward to everything that this conversation will do.
Well, thanks so much, Sam.
Thank you.
You've reached the end of another episode of the Gain Service Academy Admission podcast. Connect with us at gainserviceacademyadmission.com. Love this episode of the podcast? Head over to iTunes, Spotify, or whatever podcast app you listen to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It's very much appreciated. Thank you.